Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, take or sit the company of mockers. And now, here's Reverend Sue.
Now is always the right time, with something positive in your mind. There's always someone to pull you down. You just get
We are honored to
back
have
up
as our
and
guest
hold your
today
ground.
Robert J. Contee III, the Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, Washington, D.C. He's a native Washingtonian, and he grew up in Carver Terrace community in Northeast Washington. And a D.C. public school graduate. On May 4th, 2021, Chief Contee officially confirmed Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department. Chief Contee joined the Metropolitan Police Department as a police cadet in high school. He started as a patrol officer in the 3rd District, sergeant in the 2nd District, and the Metropolitan Police Academy, Lieutenant Intelligence Branch, Regional Operation Command East, promoted to captain, leading the Violent Crime Branch, which included homicide and the Sexual Assault Unit. Then in his spare time, and I don't believe he ever had spare time, he earned a bachelor's degree in political and professional studies with a concentration in police science from George Washington University. He also completed the Management College at the Institute for Law Enforcement Administration and the Senior Management Institute for Police of the Police Executive Research Forum in Boston, Massachusetts. Chief Contee.
Yes, ma'am.
We really appreciate you coming today. My producer, Mike Green, and our engineer, Damon Mays, I think they're just as excited as I am. So we thank you for having us to come today.
Well, and I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes. You are a native Washingtonian.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, share with us where you grew up and how you navigated your way through a pretty tough neighborhood.
So I grew up on 21st in the 2100 block of I Street Northeast. That's over in the Langston Carver community, Carver Terrace. And, I was telling someone the other day, that neighborhood, growing up, it was called Vietnam. That's how, things were pretty crazy over there, especially at the height of the crack epidemic that swept through not just our city, but cities all across the country. I had a stern mother. She was 4'11", but she was a firecracker, and I was scared to death of her. And my mom, and so many people, especially in the educational space, teachers at the schools that were right around the corner from our house, from our apartment, Charles Young Elementary, Brown Junior High School, and Spingarn Senior High School. So many teachers there poured into me. And my mother was really kind of the glue to make those things happen, because she, in addition to being mom, she also volunteered, was like a teacher's aide at the school, my elementary school where I attended. So, I had somebody kind of watching over my shoulder too, in the process of navigating a very tough neighborhood. It didn't come without challenges. My father was also present in the home, but there were some drug addiction issues that were happening right there in my home, despite all of the other stuff that's happening in the neighborhood and the great things that were happening at schools. There were challenges that I was dealing with at home, and mom was really instrumental in really just being that stabilizing force to help me to move through those very trying years in Carver Terrace.
So you know about crime. You were there in those neighborhoods. You from Washington, D.C. So in 2022, 18 teens were fatally shot in D.C., more than double the previous year. Are you frustrated about the level of crime right now? Just frustrated?
So, frustrated to an extent. There's some disappointment there. There's some frustration there. It's not the worst that we've ever seen in this city. Certainly when I was growing up, at a time we had almost 500 murders in our city. Just this past year in 2022, as you mentioned, we lost the lives of 18 teenagers, and just a couple of years prior to that, it was 16 teenagers to that. But for me, one is one too many. In any neighborhood, especially if it's your grandson or your child or your brother or your sister, any one is one too many. The thing that frustrates me probably the most is, like, sometimes I feel like in some communities, we have accepted violence as just a way of life. Like, like it's normal for a 15-year-old to walk around with a gun, or it's normal for, somebody who is engaged in violent crime or violent behavior in neighborhoods, like that goes unchecked, and nobody wants to snitch on anybody or want to, raise an issue when people are causing community harm. So that's where my frustration really lies. But to be perfectly honest, even in the midst of all the frustration, I think that there's some optimism there, right? And I'm optimistic because there are an incredible amount of young people that are really in our neighborhoods, that are trying to do the right thing, that are in our churches, that are in our schools, and really are working on being better young people, period. So it's kind of a mixture, if you will. But I haven't given up on our young people, and I hope that the rest of the residents of our city have not given up on them either.
I can imagine that crime is committed right in public spaces.
Yes.
All of us use public spaces one time or another. So everybody should be responsible for a safe communities, because we use our public spaces. You seem to be very passionate about the lack of accountability for repeat violent criminals. What can we as the public, what can we do to help have safe communities? Again, public spaces, we use our public spaces, but we are responsible, I think, for our community. How do you feel about that?
So I think, I've been very vocal about this issue of accountability. I think you have to marry accountability up with opportunity as well, right? I think people certainly need to have options and opportunities to do, other things other than commit violent acts in communities. But when people do decide to make our communities less safe by shooting a gun or robbing somebody or some violent act that makes our communities less safe, I think that there has to be accountability for that, just flat out. And what does accountability look like? I think that that's something that residents of this city really have to make a determination about, right? Like a person, if you got robbed leaving church or leaving your house and somebody put a gun in your face, I don't think it's fair to victims that person has the ability to be back out in community the next day, walking around while he's awaiting his trial, walking around potentially to rob somebody else. I think that there's something fundamentally wrong if our system allows for that to happen. And if we are part of a system that allows for that to happen, I think this is where people have to be empowered to talk to legislators and people who are driving policy and that kind of thing to make those important determinations about what needs to happen in order to change things so that we're not seeing repeat violent offenders back in communities. There's been a recent study that shows that armed violent offenders are 68% more likely to recidivate than a person who is not an armed violent offender. I think they're somewhere in like the 30s or something like that, but they're at a higher likelihood to recidivate. So, I don't want that taken out on my mother or my grandmother or somebody that I love. And I don't think the rest of the community members want to see that either. So I think that we have to be very intentional in this space to work with the policymakers and legislators who really kind of set the parameters for what accountability are going to look like in our communities.
And people are afraid, like you said, you part of a crime, and all of a sudden you see the person is out. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, that's a lot of stress on individual citizens of the city. You stated in your previous interviews that I haven't forgot where I came from.
Yes.
What do you mean by that statement?
So I haven't forgotten that people are dealing with real struggle and real issues. Both of my parents were disabled. They both had cerebral palsy, both my mother and my father. And in addition to that, as I mentioned, my father, he suffered with drug addiction issues. up until about 12 years ago. So to have a disability, and on top of that, to be addicted to drugs, and on top of that, drugs being sold out of the place where I laid my head at night. I haven't forgotten where I come from, that people sometimes find themselves in situations where, like as a young person, I had no control over where I live, or what my father was like, or what my mother was like. I had no control over that, right? Mm-hmm. But there came a time as I, matured into a younger man, that I started making decisions for myself. And those decisions are decisions that I have to be held accountable for my actions. And I don't just get a pass because I had a bad upbringing, or because, something terrible happened to me in life. There are a lot of people who experience terrible things in life, but that does not mean that people go out and victimize other people. So, I haven't forgotten where I come from the struggles that I experienced in my neighborhood. And I apply that as I look through that lens, and talking about young people, and just knowing the incredible impact on my life that having opportunity and exposure, how much of an impact that had on me. So again, I haven't forgotten where I come from, and I want to share that every opportunity that I can with other young people, that you can be better than what your zip code is.
Mm-hmm. I like the cadet program. I think the University of the District of Columbia has a program where they actually training young people to for basically public service. And also, when I think about public service, I think about the police officers here in Washington, D.C. There has been a decline recently, but what are you doing about that in reference to a decline as far as police officers?
Yeah, so actually the program that we partner with the University of District of Columbia, but it's actually a program that I've expanded here in the police department, the Police Cadet program, where we're up to about 120 police cadets. And these are young people from our communities from all across Washington, D.C. We pay them a salary. They have generous benefits. We pay for their college. We pay for their books. All of that stuff is really, really, really important, I think, to really kind of see our police department expand and include people who are from the communities that we serve. So we're using really the Police Cadet program as a way to build out our capacity within this agency, especially right now when you're seeing so many hiring challenges across all disciplines, but specifically in law enforcement, we see a lot of challenges in really having people who have an interest in this space. So for those young people who have an interest in this space, we're hiring. We're paying them, $36,000 a year out the gate. Those are for young people who just graduated from high school at 17 years of age. So we pay them well, and we train them well, and we want them to be the best police officers in the nation's capital.
That's exciting. Speaking of young people, so I hope my doctor's not online, because I like fried chicken and I like barbecue wings. I like all the food that I cannot eat. The collard greens, I can cook it, but sometimes you want to go out. So I'm out there doing a day, find my little space, my little private place. I'm not going to tell because the line would be too long, and I'm selfish on that. So I want to do these things as an older person. I want to be free as an older person. So think about a 65-year-old, perhaps a relative you have. It could be an aunt, could be an uncle. What are you thinking about doing in reference to older people being safe during the day? Yeah. And during the evening, because we are active. We don't want to be prisoners of our indoor. Yes. But we want to be active. We want to go to our greasy spot. We want to go to a healthy food spot. Right. So what are you doing in reference to that?
So in that space, one of the things that we do is really listen to, as I call them, our seasoned citizens, right? Not senior, but seasoned citizens. Right. We listen to them in terms, what are the things that make them feel safer, right? What are the things that make them feel safe? And we engage them in those spaces. I mean, yes, you can do increased police visibility in various communities and that kind of thing. But a lot of seniors, right, they want to have relationships with police officers. So for a lot of different spaces, I'm thinking back now to some pictures someone just sent me over Valentine's Day, where we went out and visited a lot of our seniors, and we took them flowers, and they have a relationship with our police officers. So more relationship building, and the more that we do in that space, I think the safer our citizens feel. It's unrealistic to say that there's going to be a police officer on every corner, in every community. But when a citizen has a relationship with a police officer, even on the worst case scenario, if something bad happens, and they have a police officer who they can reach out to, where they feel cared for, they're going to feel heard, or they're going to just be helped out. I think that goes a long way in making people feel safe, having that relationship.
In closing, describe your faith and poetry and poetry help you bring the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department. You being the chief of the police department, your faith and your poetry.
So faith and poetry both. I mean, those two things go hand in hand for me. I have long been faith-based person for many years, going all the way back to childhood. But it really becomes real for me now in this adult space, where you recognize that who you are, what you do, and all those things, are certainly beyond my capacity as a human being. And I know that I would not be able to do the things that I do without my faith. And in that, poetry as well are one of the things in connection with faith that really helps to center me. Those are two things. They are fuel for me as I go about doing the important work that I do, as I go about being a father, as I go about being a husband. Those two things really keep me centered and keep me focused in on life, focusing on what's important to me, because there are some times where a person can find themselves lost in the role that you play in life, be it a police officer or police chief or pastor. You can easily find yourself, devoting all your time, all your energy to that. And, we are so much more than that, right? I mean, I'm a dad, and when I leave work or, and I got to go home and I got to be dad, I have to be present in that space too. But for me to be present and accountable for my children and for my wife, et cetera, I really lean a lot on my faith, and I really use poetry as a tool to really kind of help balance me out.
For our leaders, perhaps in your department, other leaders throughout the country, what will you leave with this show now that you would like for them to know? Just maybe one thing, just as leaders, sometimes so difficult, like your family, your friends. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, especially for leaders, that you have to model the behavior that you expect from people. And when people can see that in you, when they see you modeling good character, when they see you modeling, being a person, or a wise person who is not rushing to make a decision, they see you as a leader in that space, a person. When I think about leaders, you should know who you are getting, who's showing up, right? Not like leaders sometimes you see, like, you don't know what you're going to get. On Monday they're this person, Wednesday they're this person, Friday they're something totally different. You have to be consistent as a leader. And I think that more leaders model the behavior that they expect from people, if more leaders were consistent with people in terms of their interactions, that we see a lot more people being desirous of being leaders because of the demonstration and the examples that they have for them. I've been blessed over the course of many years to have great leaders in several different arenas, not all law enforcement, some clergy, some that are in law enforcement, some that are in business, that had poured into me over the course of years. And I've been able to really pull the best of all of those spaces together to help me be the leader that I am today.
We thank you. We thank you. And it reminds me of your poetry by Benjamin E. Mays. I've only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Voice into it, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give an account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it. May God continue to bless you. And we are so blessed to have you as our chief here in Washington, D.C. To our listeners, we know what to do. We continue to pray. And when we pray, we do action. There's a lot of us, some things that we can do as citizens of this city or across this country. Let us do it. Let us do it, because we are so blessed to have Chief Robert J. Contee. May God bless you and continue to use you in a mighty way. Thank you.
Thank you.
You hold on. And keep the faith. Tell somebody on your row. Say. Keep the faith. Come on. Tell somebody sitting around you. Keep the faith. Keep the faith. Come on, encourage somebody else. Keep the faith.